Hey, it's Rob here. Just wanted to let you know that this podcast opens with some football talk, and Patrick has been making a few bets. So if you don't want to hear some gambling conversation, you might want to skip forward to
approximately 4 minutes and 34 seconds into the podcast. That's 4:34.
You probably heard Cado there.
Insert
tell you.
Yeah, yep. The time and the timestamp in the description. I'll also re-record this. There'll be a future Cado here. Don't worry about it.
But the point is, Patrick has gone full uncut gems. He's placing parlays. He's taking lightning points. He's in deep to Arlo or Arno. So God knows what's going to become of him. But if you don't want to be exposed to that, if you're sensitive to it, I fully get it, and you should skip the opening to the pod.
本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。I miss you.
What's good, Internet? It's January 25th, and you are listening to Waypoint Radio, episode 456. I'm your host, Rob Zachney, and I'm joined by Patrick Klepek.
12 seconds left. It blew up all of my bets. I hadn't gambled at all. Okay.
No, I'm saying I'm glad we're getting into it. We have to talk.
I thought you had a different part of your intro. No.
Oh no. I'm glad we're diving right in. One
of the things I usually like to do at the beginning of every football season is I have an account on, Bovada, like one of the places that lets you place remote bets at like a Vegas casino from states that have not passed legal sports betting. Illinois has that. There are like far more convenient ways for me to do it, but once COVID started, it just seemed so weird and silly to bet on these football games because like every day you'd wake up and like there'd be wild swings in the players that were out. So I just didn't even mess with it for the last 2 years. And then when the NFL passed their most recent COVID updated guidelines.
What if we just stopped testing for it?
Yes. Well, I think it was we're no longer going to require mandatory daily testing for unvaccinated players. We are only going to test people if they voluntarily come forward with symptoms, which is just the league saying we're done. Like, we're not going to have a situation where you wake up on Saturday and Mahomes is not playing on Sunday. If he wants to test positive for COVID at home and bring it to his team, go, God willing. So I looked at my Bovada account and I had like some winnings from like $200, like from some Super Bowl bets that paid off, including my favorite one every year, which is to put $50 on the coin flip. It's incredible odds because it can only go one way or the other. But I always ask my daughter to pick it, and she got it wrong one year, but then she got it right last year. And so we're 50-50, just like the coin toss. Anyway, so I like these games this weekend seemed really exciting, and I only really wanted to bet on the Sunday games because I feel like putting money on a Packers game is just like a way to ensure it will go against me. So my theory of the case for Sunday was that I felt very confident the Rams were going to beat the Bucs. And that I wanted to believe that the Bills were going to get over this mountain. And so I put a $40 bet on a Rams over Bucs. I put a $40 bet on Bills over Chiefs. And then I did a parlay that both of those were going to break the same way with another $40. And for there was a 12 seconds left on the clock where Rob, you know what? I was going to make the money that like that PC you told me to get. I got it, buddy. I got that extra $400, $500 that I was sweating. And then Mahomes did Mahomes things combined with the Bills defense, like absolutely collapsing.
Is it a collapse if they never stood up the entire game? That's
kind of the things. That's sort of like the game when they call sort of like the really opening of like the modern offensive revolution, which was that Rams Chiefs game.
Yes.
That, like each team scored like 50 points or something ridiculous. That basically Jared Goff, a guy who is now like more or less considered like a laughing stock of a quarterback. Although he's probably better than his image actually nets him. The Lions could do worse.
He was the weak part of a championship like contending team.
High floor, low ceiling. And a lot of teams could do worse than that. And that was a game in which the defense was more or less irrelevant. Or the theory goes that where football is going is that defenses are no longer about stopping the offenses. It's just, can you just come up with something at one point to like flip the field? Like, just if you can get an interception and just interrupts the offense, that's where all this is going. And the idea being that, offenses are just going to outstrip defenses. That's not been proven true. There's like this cover two shell concepts that essentially like there's this whole psych theory that is going on in like defenses now, which is that folks like Mahomes, Allen, Rodgers, like the really good quarterbacks, what's the phrase? Big game hunting, where they want the big play. They want the splashy one. They want to show what their arm can do. They want to show what their brain can do. And they are unwilling to spend 4 quarters just taking 4 or 5 yard passes that the defense says, just take them. You can have them. We're just going to give you those yards. And if it's sort of like if you were to go to a gambling table and like just take low stake wins over and over, you can make a lot of money. But that's not why people gamble. They want the big play. And like that's been the reaction by defenses to the offensive revolution is like, fine, you can have the cheap stuff, but aren't you going to get bored and want to do something else? So.
Well, and I heard that argument applied to Mahomes specifically. I think I was listening to, I think it might have been Mina Kimes' pod earlier this year, where she was talking to one of the analysts over at ESPN, and they were talking about like when Mahomes' stats were like less impressive earlier in the season, more mistakes were piling up, and one of the arguments offered there was like Mahomes seemed kind of bored early in the season, where just like the game comes very easily to him, and he was starting to make the mistakes that like people were saying, oh, is he being figured out? And the argument was, no, he's still putting, like when he wants to like pour it on, he still is often doing that. But there's like an element of like sloppiness cropping into his game, as he does make some of those like just low percentage plays just because like, fuck it, that's way more fun than picking change up off the street. And then yesterday you saw like there he's up against the Buffalo Bills resurgence. Before even it was clear that Josh Allen was going to be a like elite level quarterback, the Bills built their team around a really good defense. Like that's sort of foundational to what they were doing before Allen really emerged as a reliable like a high performing QB. We saw like the Bills defense did unholy things to the Patriots. Just last week. Didn't matter against Mahomes. Mahomes picked them apart, and it wasn't just. I was trying to like. I can't read schemes for shit, but I will say this: it seems very tough to do anything when like your pass rush is getting through, and Mahomes is literally just one step faster than all your pass rushers. Moving like the sheer number of times he was flushed. And nobody could get a like hand around his ankle, and he would just like dart out to the side. And once a play goes on for like, 8 seconds, 10 seconds past the snap,
you're not playing defense anymore.
No, there's no more coverage scheme out there.
It's just people running around like it's a schoolyard football game, pickup game.
And Josh Allen was in that mode, probably even more so at times. And so yeah, like I think it was a weekend full of like interesting football. I cracked up at the Packers meltdown.
True. I mean, they were up 10-3 with I think a couple of minutes to go, and then they have that special teams debacle combined with Jimmy Garoppolo finally having the one good drive, one half decent drive he needed. And then, the Bears playing fourth dimensional chess in beating the Packers by cutting one of their best players years ago in an irrational move. A longtime kicker who has one off season is then cut and then just goes on to mortally wound the Packers. And if presumably like drive like the way they lost, I think there's a world where Rodgers, a complete scumbag, piece of shit, ultra talented quarterback, but I I think if they won the Super Bowl and I sort of like resigned myself, like, dude, you just need to be ready. Like, it kind of seems like it's their year and he's on this fuck you tour. And I think I think there's a world where he can pull it off. And so I kind of resigned myself to that. And I figured if he stuck with it, if they won the Super Bowl, like, was he really going to leave and go to Denver? Like, probably not. He probably finds a way to make it work and then ends up retiring, in 3 to 4 years. But then the way they went out, which was like the most, like, he looked terrible. Like, he'd just gotten done, like, showing his feet on camera to reporters when he had like the toe thing, showing his complete ass with all the COVID stuff. And the only way that works, the only way you can like show up to Soldier Field, and yes, we're marks. Like the Bears have been so bad against Rodgers for so many years that like we don't have like too many legs to stand on, like mocking him. But when you start doing things like saying like, I own you, you have to back that up with essentially winning the Super Bowl, or at least playing your mind out, and you can point the blame clearly at someone else. But then that like pathetic showing he had against a really good 49ers defense, a really good 49ers defense. Like that team is playing out of their minds. But
to the point, like, both the Bills and KC came in with credible defenses and good quarterbacks and good receivers found ways to like bust those up. The Packers looked like shit, and you can say, it was tough conditions at Lambeau. It was bad though. Like it was not a good showing.
So you can't say that when that's the
brand.
Like, people have done the math on. There's this thing. Teams like the Bears, teams in the Midwest specifically, they'll say like, oh, it's bear weather. It's like, well, what you want is like these teams from California or Texas to like come out and come play in like, freezing temperatures, because we know how to do that because we're out here and we're the Chicago Bears. And then people have done the math. Like, there's no marked advantage for bear weather, right. But there is, like, Lambeau is one of the few stadiums that like has like a tangible like home field advantage from the crowd and the weather. Like, who knows how you can separate all those variables, but you just don't like this. The stat they showed before the football game, like what teams, how teams have functioned coming into Lambeau in freezing temperatures in the playoffs is bad. You just don't want to do it. You're going to lose. Anyway, that's all to say, you can't make that like one of the marks of your team, like this is our advantage, and they completely fucking crumble when you're put in the same situation.
And it just got worse because once like the game was over and people were starting to go through the tape, that offense shouldn't have been shut down. Like the Packers had opportunities. Rodgers wasn't capitalizing on them, right? He was passing up like easier throws.
Well, because he doesn't trust the scheme. He trusts himself.
Which
right?
has
like,
always been, because he's an enormously arrogant prick.
Yeah.
Like remember that thing? I think we talked about this on Waypoints ages ago when there's that big report about like just the toxic environment between him and McCarthy and how much they hated each other. But one of the arguments was Rodgers operates as this like football computer, right? And he's smarter than the scheme. He's smarter than the coaches. And when push comes to shove, like, he will trust his judgment, and you will learn to trust his judgment too, because often like he's right. But the trouble is like when it gets out of control and he just discards the entire scheme and discards the entire game plan because he's like, I'm smarter than that. I will figure out how to win this game.
And often he's right. That's what people like him fall into the trap of, is like, you do it just often enough, you can convince yourself that, yes, like, I am superhuman and I am always right. But he's also 36, getting old. You know what I mean? Like, there are all these factors working.
Well, yeah, but it's never worked out that well in the playoffs. Like, that's the thing. Right. I think like part and parcel of his playoff collapse is like those ridiculous regular season stats he puts up and those immaculate games he puts together. Where does it go in the playoffs? And I saw some people making the argument that like, well, part of where it goes is that in those pressure situations, he is less inclined to stick with any kind of game plan and is more inclined to start being like, I'm going to find the receivers and routes I want, and I don't care what the play is. And so that leads to situations where, like, you know, he's passing up on a open man underneath for a first down because he's like, no, I can I'm Aaron Rodgers. I can throw into double coverage 30 yards downfield.
Well, when he did that for Adams, he had was it Lazard was open, or like one of them was one of his receivers was, if he just looked. And granted, that's easy to say, but for someone like him, actually, it is easy to say.
It is,
right?
yeah.
Like for a lot of younger quarterbacks who their ability to read the field is limited. Part of the advantage, part of the arc of a quarterback is as your physical, like the rest of your body starts to deteriorate or be less elite as it was when you were younger, you in theory make up for that in your brain so that you can analyze the field and essentially do what Tom Brady has done, which is just like, I'm just gonna, he can still throw the deep ball, but that was never his trait. It was just being able to slice you. He's selfish in many other ways, but unselfish in how he will just take what is being given to him. He has, especially as he's gotten older, he's like, I will take the 6 yards over and over again. Like, if you remember, when he was on the Patriots, that was Julian Edelman's specialty, was just, he would just throw to him over the middle, over and over again. I remember it was one of the Super Bowls where they did it 4 or 5 times in a row. It was just the same play, just other quarterbacks would go looking for something else, but he would just take what's in front of you, and it might take a little longer, but all of a sudden you're knocking on the door of the touchdown. And
and Rodgers just refused to try to settle into that kind of rhythm across
it's so
the game.
great. It was just so personally satisfying to watch, because this is true of society in general, but is especially true in football, where bad people are rarely matched with bad circumstances or anything that feels remotely like justice, right? You have a Ben Roethlisberger who, credibly accused of sexual assault, and the way the announcers are talking about him as he's doing his end of career, I can't play football anymore, and this is a bad team, sort of end thing. They're talking about how he's a family man. He just wants to spend more time with his family, and that's just how this works. I think Tyreek Hill, correct me if I'm wrong, he was the Chiefs player that there was involved in a thing where he broke his son's arm at one point. No, that's the guy who went to the Browns, wasn't it?
I think there were 2 Chiefs.
Sort of doesn't matter, right? All I'm illustrating is that people do bad things, and if they're excellent football players, they will find their way back into the league, and there is no moral punishment for anything beyond sort of virtue signaling in the NFL if you are talented enough to keep demonstrating that talent. And so to watch Rodgers just be just such openly a prick, and talking about how he was I really enjoyed how I can get a rise out of people. He wasn't just being a jerk. It was a jerk that knew they were being a jerk, enjoyed being the jerk, and that also just happened to be having once again an incredible season where one of the controversies was so the people who vote for MVP, even though there's all this discussion of who's the MVP of the league, it really comes down to this handful of handpicked reporters that I think are picked by the Associated Press, and one of them who's based in Chicago, I think had the very reasonable sort of musing on a podcast or something that was I think he's a jerk, and I really don't want to give him the MVP because he was a giant asshole this season, which I think is it's an arbitrary award. Fuck off.
Yeah.
Do what you want with it. And it caused this huge thing. And then Rodgers got to have this moral high ground. It's just, I was so happy to see him miserable, because he also can't hide when he's miserable. He is one of sometimes these quarterbacks when they're frustrated, they're just kind of stone face. And Rodgers is just, and there's a reason one of those famous gifs of him is him looking at, I think it was an interception in the red zone, and him looking at an iPad and tossing it after the fact. He just
you
can't
can see
hide
during
this
the
disgust.
game, when his coach was trying to go over schemes with him, Rodgers was not listening.
This ugly ass hair, lack of haircut too, just everything about it. Oh.
Yeah, no, that was good vibes all the way through. Just watching this guy who has made the bet that I'm just so talented, you have to put up with whatever I do.
Yes.
And to see but that talent expires at Christmas, effectively. It stops mattering. at Christmas. And so, like, to an extent, like, it's got to be driving him crazy, is that he came in with so much promise. 2010 looms so large, and he can't put it together. He can't bag the championships.
Well, and there's also specifically with him, there is this. So he is from the Bay Area.
Yep.
And very famously wanted to be drafted by the 49ers the year that I think he went to Cal, the year that he came out into the draft. And when the 49ers passed on him, despite him like openly lobbying, like I would like to be, like, this would be perfect for me. I want to be the hometown kid and go play for the 49ers, like essentially, sort of succeed Montana. And there's a famous clip from the draft where he's asked, like, I can't remember what the question was, but like, do you have anything, a message, for the 49ers for not picking you? He's like, well, like something along the lines of like, I'm going to spend my career making you regret not picking me. And then this game, he is 0 for 4 against specifically the 49ers in the postseason. 3 of those came in the Jim Harbaugh era, who like he just seemed to, like, with Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick, just seemed to have, like, they would go into Lambeau Field and beat them in the playoffs. Like, for whatever reason, Harbaugh just like had his number. But for like, that's just like an extra delicious little wrinkle that if he either retires, goes somewhere else, whatever the fuck he does with the rest of his career, if his final note in Green Bay is to go 0-4 against the team that he, 20 years ago said, I'm going to haunt you. That is just like you can't invent it.
Beaten by a quarterback who appears to be a Bears fan, and a Bears kicker.
Yeah, the 49ers quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo, who like my family has some connections to, like my brother's friends with Jimmy's older brother, and so yeah, like you have a guy, like Jimmy Garoppolo.
That part right after he's caught on camera telling Robbie Gould, "Hey, fuck the Packers." After they've won
that's
the
a
game.
Chicago kid. Like I know he's from the suburbs, but like that's the Chicago flavor of like, yeah, he may be for the 49ers, he might have been on the Patriots, but at the end of the day, fuck the Packers. And that was just, I felt so good for Robbie too. Like he deserved, I was never mad at him for, he even said he wanted to come back to the Bears when they were having their kicker troubles, and things they just didn't work out that way. But that was it brought my heart so much joy on Saturday night.
They were all close games. Like it was Tennessee
every single game was decided by a final like a lead change in like the final,
and until last night, it had all been decided by a field goal.
Yes,
and arguably, you'd say the last field goal did sort of seal it up too.
Yes,
but the Titans Bengals game ended up being like unexpectedly terrific. Like great last minute swings there. But yeah, I'm gonna be riding the high of that Chiefs and Bills game forever. Like it's going like it's one of those things where I think football sometimes has this problem of inevitably the season eventually, you don't know where exactly it's going to hit, but you're going to hit anticlimax in the postseason, because like you will probably see a truly great everything on the line matchup before the Super Bowl. And it will be hard for a game to top that no matter what the stakes are. And last night that was probably it. Like it was the most incredible high wire act I've seen in ages, where like the thing that sticks with me is after the Chiefs went ahead inside of 2 minutes, there's like 1 minute left, and you saw Josh Allen just looking around his team, like making the okay gesture, like I got this, don't worry about it. He was just calming everyone down, came out, drove them straight down. It was nuts. I think the one thing I'm curious to see how this evolution goes, though. It does sort of seem like defenses got so fast and started emphasizing like really quick linebackers in particular, that they can't physically stop big dudes anymore. Like Josh Allen was bullying the shit.
He injured a player.
Yeah.
Like towards the end of that game, I was think Denzel Ward, I think was the player on the Chiefs, but the last name was Ward. I think his first name was Denzel. I might be wrong on that. But anyway, like he pummeled forward on a run and just like shoulder checked. Like that's the offensive players, like their offensive players are meant to be generally, other than the offensive line, like skinny, like not skinny, but like relative to defensive players, like skinnier dudes who are meant to go fast. And like you are not so.
He's got that Cam Newton thing of you don't realize how big he is because his proportions are perfectly average. It's just like the character creator like just sized up that person to like 150 and 120% of normal values, like doesn't look like a big dude. And then you see him running behind an offensive lineman and he's bigger than the offensive lineman. And you're like, oh shit, like how do you stop that guy? And the answer is you just throw piles of bodies in front of him. And yeah, like dudes start getting hurt. But I do kind of wonder, I think we saw enough games this season where like defenses could get shredded by that sort of physical attack that I do kind of wonder if we're about to see maybe a move toward, it's probably good if we have just like one or two more guys in like behind the line who are like not the build of a corner or a safety and we're a little bit more of a stockier, like, hard hitting linebacker. Cause like, the degree to which defenses now are getting ravaged by like good running attacks or just like extremely large QBs is like I feel like you're about to see the meta shift again because so many offensive attacks seem designed around the idea of like once you clear the front four, there ain't nobody who's gonna be able to win a one-on-one tackle against you.
Yeah. So I think part of this stuff is cool that I'm glad that defenses are finding ways to be creative. And like the idea that it's not as much as it's scheme, but like the idea that you're playing with the psychology of ultra talented athletes and essentially betting on their ego is just a really fascinating way to think about like the meta of a sport. And like asking players who think they can do it all, like, what if you just took a little bit less? You can still have it all, but like you got to do it in smaller chunks. Is a really fascinating way to think about how you stop, because the game's only trending in that direction of these like ultra athletic, mobile, do it all quarterbacks. Where at a certain point, there's like there are times where like Josh Allen specifically, because Mahomes can run, but he doesn't run like Allen does. Like there's only so much you can do if they're hyper accurate, really strong. Fat, like again, like you said, like all the stats are like they got a cheat engine out and just like put too many of them in. Usually players are supposed to be balanced in some way, strengths and weaknesses. And Allen's used to be that his brain would fritz, like he would just throw a ball that like what were you even looking at? And he just doesn't do shit like that anymore. And so
apparently like he's like one of the few quarterbacks who significantly improved accuracy after being drafted, which
accuracy is supposed to be flat. Like accuracy doesn't even change that much from like your high school days. Like you can change your mechanics, you can change, how you like move your hips. There are things that you can change about your game, like your release. But accuracy is, by a large extent, from everything I've read, is like kind of you're born with it. It's just sort of like either you can do, kind of do all once you hit a certain point, that just is what your accuracy is within a certain range of numbers. And he's like the rare quarterback that like improved once he got to the NFL. If it's going to improve, it should have happened a long time ago. And so that's what makes him such a weird unicorn of a player outside of all the other ways that he's talented.
Yeah,
he looks like such a doofus too. Like I can't take him seriously whatsoever.
That blank little face.
I know, but then every game, or especially these past two games where I was delighted in watching him beat the shit out of the Patriots, and it's just like every time I see him, like I can't take you seriously, dude. Except that every time you play, I have to, and so there's just something about him that doesn't look. I don't know what I'm looking for, but I don't know. It's just something about him that I can't.
He's got kind of a weird baby face.
I guess it's
tough to square with the fact that like he's out there as this like apex predator.
Yes.
Yes. And it is kind of a weird thing, but yeah, it's something else to watch. I do feel so bad for my friends from Buffalo.
Yes.
You wandered the wilderness of football for 25 years, following like a near dynasty that like couldn't quite close the deal out against the Giants, and then got ambushed by the creation of a Cowboys dynasty. And by the way, kind of a weird blip in Cowboys history. Like that has not been repeated, in part because it pissed Jerry Jones off so much that he wasn't getting all the credit for that dynasty, that by God, ever since he wanted the world to know that it was his team, that hasn't worked out quite as well. But, so Buffalo gets denied in the 90s and then has just been in the sewers of the NFL for ages. And they've got an incredible team, and they've arrived on the scene like 1 year after Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes set up this like buzzsaw of a team. And that's brutal, man. It like you have all the pieces there, and now you have this like final boss in your conference that you just can't beat.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, yes, I agree. And it seems they built their team specifically to try and like slay this dragon. And they kind of did. Like they proved they could, right? There's nothing about that game that suggests they couldn't have won that game. It's just, they did, Allen didn't get a chance in overtime to even.
They proved they can hold their own in the track meet. But I gotta believe on some level you're like, there's got to be a way we can make it harder for Mahomes. And they just, when the chips were down, they just couldn't. Like there was never like. I was worried about that 13 seconds, right? Like I was sitting there. I was like,
again, how many times have we watched, Aaron Rodgers do that to our own team? It's like you can't give him any time because they will find a way. And it's like that's the notion of the Bills like having to always go up against Mahomes, but at least that happens a little bit later in the game, like of the game of like the length of the season. Like whereas for us, it's like we've watched our team cycle through garbage after garbage and start over because we can't even escape the first level, right? It's like, well, Rodgers is just here. If you have to always measure your team against one of the greatest that has ever played, that makes for frustrating team building because you never even get the satisfaction of like escaping to like, because we get once, right? To have 2018, we get one down year from the Packers. We escape to get annihilated in the round one of the playoffs on a fluky a kick, and like now we hope that he leaves, and like that's the way to salvation. Is not a good team or good process, but it's just maybe he could go away so everyone else could suck and we can suck too, but maybe all four of us can suck together in the division.
Well, it's a beautiful dream for the future of the NFC North. I'm still out there thinking, keep your eye on those Lions next season. They got a taste of blood in their mouths. They're just going to be going bananas next season. So we should probably talk about some video games,
why not?
Or video games news at least. I guess we've been talking so much about Wisconsin. We might as well revisit the Activision situation and the sort of exciting news coming out of Wisconsin that came out this last week.
Yeah, I got to admit, this definitely took me by surprise, and I feel like was almost like the universe pushing back at the conclusion of our discussion, both as an article on the website between you and I, and then in the podcast that we recorded last week. In response to Microsoft purchasing Activision Blizzard, we posited that for reasons that would be entirely understandable, that inevitable purchase, which takes place over, the next year and whatever, might release some of the tension about the culture within that company, and that they might look to Microsoft as being, if not better stewards of the culture, then at least different ones, and that would maybe tamper down some of the calls for unionization, would tamper down some of the organizing that's occurred. And, we'll see how all of that shakes out, writ large going forward. But it was certainly really encouraging and perhaps purposely timed in that the QA testers, and this is specific, it's not all of this studio, the QA testers at Ravensoft, who used to be a studio that made their own games, famously Hexen, Heretic, spin-offs of like the Doom Clone Wars of the 90s when everyone was making shooters. One of their last notable, they also made the X-Men. What were those top-down action games? The X-Men ones that people really, Ultimate Alliance? No, maybe. Anyway, people know what I'm talking about. Those games. They did an open world Wolfenstein game. They were their own original studio, and then when they got folded into, I think they had a publishing deal with Activision, then got bought by Activision. They essentially turned into a Call of Duty satellite studio. And what they've been in years past was building levels for like the multiplayer side of Call of Duty games. And then with Warzone taking off, they've become sort of a support studio for Warzone specifically, the Battle Royale spinoff of Call of Duty, and doing a lot of QA for that as well. And back in December, Activision, after having a bunch of people like move to Wisconsin, they like just kind of unilaterally canceled the contracts of a bunch of folks out of nowhere, brought some people on full time, but like the general feeling was that it was done pretty unfairly, arbitrarily, and for a company that was just bragging about how much money Warzone had made, seemed kind of shitty that they were just like leaving these people.
And just real quickly, like,
sure,
we should stress that a lot of game development happens in like regions that are like game development hubs. So if you've moved to Wisconsin, there are not that many like studios in the Midwest for you to work at. Like if you have to change jobs in the Pacific Northwest or like somewhere in California, there's a lot of places that you can like sort of laterally move to. If you have moved to a place like Raven and that job falls apart, that has potential to be even more like life disrupting.
Yeah, Chicago has a scene that is becoming more and more robust, but Raven's in Madison, and Chicago is several hours away from Madison. It's not. That
it's
would be
in
disruptive.
life-ruining commute range.
Yes, yeah. Like, my parents used to live in Wisconsin when they had me, and then my dad did that commute from Wisconsin every day, 5 days a week, and then he said, "We're not doing that anymore. We're moving to Illinois." So it's just not. Even if it's not suggesting, even you could find another job in the Chicago scene, it is not an easy way to get there, and so. That led to a strike that has gone on for the better part of 5 or 6 weeks by a number of folks out at Raven, and there was a strike fund that had raised, last I checked, almost $400,000 to try and cover the expenses of the people who were going on that strike. And sort of where we're at in this story now is that on Friday it was announced that the QA testers are partnering with the Communication Workers of America to form the Game Workers Alliance Union, and the QA testers are asking to become a voluntarily recognized union. What that means is, and this can be kind of confusing, is that you can organize to become a union, which itself has a number of stages in which it could be, we agree to try and form a union, we're handing out union cards. It's a bit of a complicated process, but you can get to the point where you have formed a union, but the union then needs to be recognized by the company so that you could begin negotiating a contract and start figuring out what your relationship with your employer is vis-a-vis the union. And so they are in this early stage of organizing a union, but there are many steps that would come after this. Activision has released a statement. I didn't have it when I published this, but they passed it on afterwards. And this is their response to it was, Activision Blizzard is carefully reviewing the request for voluntary recognition from the CWA, which seeks to organize around 36 of the company's nearly 10,000 employees. While we believe that a direct relationship to the company and its team members delivers the strongest workforce opportunities, we deeply respect the rights of all employees under the law to make their own decisions about whether or not to join a union. Across Activision Blizzard, we remain focused on listening closely to our employees and providing the improved pay, benefits, and professional opportunities needed to attract and retain the world's best talent. Over the past couple of years, this has included raising minimum compensation for Raven QA employees by 41%, extending paid time off, expanding access to medical benefits for employees and significant others, and transitioning more than 60% of temporary Raven QA staff into full-time employees. Of course, that more than 60% of temporary, that transition is part of the reason they're striking. There's that 40% that's lacking is part of the reason they're striking. So, at least in public, not the most aggressive response, but as we have seen time and time again in all, stretch across society when organizing occurs, they always make the flowery public statement, and then the anti-union and like union busting tactics. Well, that's going to happen much more quietly, most likely.
I'm also curious. Again, this is just because, Wisconsin is on my mind. Sorry, this is a complete tangent. I apologize. It is such a wild story, though, that like this brings it to mind. I don't know if you've been following this. It's been going around Twitter a little bit. So it looks like a state court in Wisconsin granted an injunction to stop a bunch of.
This is the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah, I read that this morning.
Yeah, so this is from the Alton Post Crescent, where I went to school, where a bunch of people were leaving, I think, the Theta Care facility in Neenah, Wisconsin. Shout outs to Neenah Foundry. And we're moving to the hospital I used to go to, St. Elizabeth's, which is now run by the Ascension Group. Because this is the world we live in, right? Where all hospitals now form into chains and use their market power. But like a bunch of people were leaving the Theta Care facility for like better gigs over at Ascension, and Theta Care like.
Well, it seems specifically when I'd read the article, because this part was buried kind of at the bottom, was that like one person like applied for a job over there and was like, hey, like the pay's better, the benefits are better, there's a bunch of other openings, and then a bunch of other people were like, okay, and then they all sort of applied.
And Theta Care's been screaming poaching, but it doesn't sound like poaching happened.
No, it sounds like a bunch of people realized a good opportunity, and it just happened to all occur at the same time.
Right, and so I think it was Theta Care basically asking for injunctive relief because it would be so disruptive and dangerous for patients for all these critical staff to like leave en masse to go to this other facility. And like I think last I heard, a judge had granted that. And so these folks, I don't think these folks are being made to work at their old place, but they're not being allowed to start work at their
correct.
At
they're
their
like in limbo while like part of the legal process plays out this week.
Right. And so like there is like this is only in my mind because like we are starting to see real Gilded Age ass court rulings coming out of places where especially where like the GOP tends to have a hammerlock on the courts. And so I don't know that would come into play here in terms of like protecting the rights of workers. Like there are a lot of national regulations around like union organizing and the like rights that the NLRB guarantees, but Wisconsin is hostile territory for a pro-labor movement. Not to say that there's any really like friendly territory for that in the U.S., but like Wisconsin is challenging terrain. It would seem right now because they're on the cusp of bringing back indentured servitude.
Yeah.
But it does seem like this is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the milestone though that companies really will move heaven and earth to avoid having workers even achieve.
Well, look at because it opens the door.
Yeah.
It suggests different ways are possible.
And once they've done this, now Activision's hands are much more tied. Like you fire employees who are even thinking about unionizing before they can take any steps to do that, which is why big companies are so notorious for paying for lots of surveillance firms and anti-union like experts to sort of kind of kill these movements in the crib. Because
then look what they have to do. Like, just look what Starbucks like did to try and stop ultimately just a couple of dozen employees from trying to unionize out in New York. Look at what Amazon, was, again, like you said, moving heaven and earth to try and like poison the well of the voting for that factory unionization. I forget which state that was in, but
Alabama.
Yes,
I think so.
And so like. You try and do this all behind the scenes, before it has to go public. But can't imagine it wouldn't follow the same. The one thing I'll say though, I'm just, this is me just spitballing. Like, is it possible that they would find themselves in a more compromised position, Activision, in terms of cracking down on this, given the fact that this is also going to coincide with a combing of the finances of this deal as like Microsoft is trying to make this acquisition, right? Like, is it more likely that maybe they kind of allow this to happen if the QA testers want it to happen, because getting in a big public fight with your workers while you're trying to sell the government on this sale? I don't know. I have no idea like where that fits in the calculus, but it makes a unique scenario that is different than these other more recent union movements have dealt with.
Well, it feels like a very tough position to be in, because if you look at like, so the way these things start, like, I think we were really interested in like, wow, Starbucks, like a few locations of Starbucks unionized. Now, union movements are going like wildfires through different Starbucks locations. And so like Starbucks is now confronting the fact that what you could have said at the outset was like, well, what's it really matter if a couple stores do this? Like once the precedent and roadmap is down there, it becomes much, much easier to do. And so like,
and it's not as much of a hard sell to folks who maybe are on the fence, right? Like if you have to be the person out of the gate, like taking the fire from corporate and like, oh, they're going to write about us in newspaper. You know what I mean? Like you can see how you scare people off. But once it just becomes like a much more casual conversation that it's going to be like not quite flicking a switch, but like moving in that direction, you can see how a lot more people get on board faster. And it's also fun to flick the middle finger at people.
Yeah. So, I mean, but if you're in Activision shoes, like it feels like anything you do at this point is probably wrong. Right. Because probably Microsoft isn't stoked
doesn't want
like,
a union.
inherit a union shop. But at the same time, like you're trying to close a deal, you don't want to generate yet more bad headlines and possibly run afoul of like union protections that exist around the formation of union. And now like there's a whole legal morass that Microsoft would stand to inherit. The other thing that like I was just kind of I was wondering about this. I guested on the Tech Won't Save Us podcast this week, and one of the things that occurred to me while I was talking to Paris over there was we just had that whole union negotiation here where a lot hinged on successorship, right? Where like if this company changes hands, what happens to the union contract we have with Vice? And there was a lot of like hand-wringing around that, a lot of anxiety around that. And so that's another dynamic here where like the union recognition is one thing, but like the collective bargaining agreement that would be hashed out between the two, what happened? What if this all unfolds before the stroke of like deal midnight, and now it's under new ownership? I'm sure, like if it gets to that stage, the people like leading these union efforts will be savvy enough to negotiate that. But it's another complicating factor where like Activision wants things to be stable and extremely normal and boring, I think, from here. Mm-hmm. And that may not remain an option, given that now on the heels of these scandals, you have a union drive that might be gaining some traction. So, it seems really fascinatingly timed, and it'll be cool to see how this unfolds from here.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens next. It's these processes are not fast. It is not going to be the case that they have a vote on being a union. Like that is going to take time. Like this formation could take just as long as like this sale, which is what makes the timing so fascinating. But I'm as someone, we're, people who've been in unions ourselves, been in part of union negotiations. This and the place I've worked before when I worked at Kotaku/Gawker. I've now spent the better part of a decade in a union, and like my life is better for it. And so I'm rooting for these folks as well, because I think your job is better when you can negotiate collectively. And so I'm hoping they get the chance to do that as well.
One last thing I wanted to hit before we take a break here is that one of the let's check in on the console wars, I guess.
Okay, all right.
As we're talking about this acquisition, Some of the hand wringing was about, wow, what a blow. Like if you looked at this through the lens of like 2010 rhetoric around games, right? This would be like, checkmate, Sony. Microsoft just cornered the market on Activision Blizzard. So it seems like Microsoft, again, because everyone is trying to be extremely normal and boring during all this. Patrick, you noticed that Microsoft appears to be trying to calm those waters a little bit, but not completely ruling out like actions down the road.
Yeah, well, when Microsoft bought or made the proposal to buy ZeniMax, who owns Bethesda and Tango Gameworks and a number of other studios, they had similar kind of hemming and hawing language over like, well, what's going to happen in the future to these games? Is everything just going to go immediately exclusive to Xbox? And, games like Starfield that were announced for every platform, like what's going to happen? And they hemmed and hawed, and then ultimately they did, which was like no great shock. If you're going to spend $7 billion buying a thing, you're going to leverage the asset to your advantage the best you can. They, eventually announced that games like Starfield and that upcoming vampire, multiplayer game, like all that stuff's going to be, that's all going to be, exclusive to Xbox going forward. But they were going to honor existing agreements, right? Like, so Deathloop, still not available on Xbox. I presume that'll happen sometime later this year, whenever that deal is up. Ghostwire Tokyo, which is a game that comes out soonish. It's been delayed a couple times, so I think the leaked date was like late March. That is also going to be a PS5 exclusive, but that will also, I'm sure, come to Xbox at one point. And so, yeah, there was this quote from Phil Spencer on Twitter, because this is how we communicate now. Had good calls this week with leaders at Sony. I confirmed our intent to honor all existing agreements upon acquisition of Activision Blizzard and our desire to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. Sony is an important part of our industry and we value our relationship, which, easy to read that as like, oh, okay, well, I guess maybe some of the early conjecture of like, oh, maybe the single player Call of Duty stuff will like go straight to Xbox, and maybe Warzone stays multi-platform, and they'll treat Call of Duty a little bit more like they treat Minecraft, which is like platform agnostic and just let it keep making money. And you can read that into this here, but I don't know. I just read this as there are deals that have expiration dates. Mm-hmm. We're not going to tear those deals up, because you know what? You know what might get people to be a little upset over should a deal close or not?
Yep.
If they start indicating that we're going to immediately leverage that monopoly the power of this deal.
We're using it, baby.
Right. It's like between that and like Microsoft's also going to want to be able to point to regulators like, hey, our Game Pass stuff operates in a web browser. Hey, if Sony wanted to, they could just put this Game Pass app onto their platform, and they could access all these, like, those are all like, you see the arguments, like you could see, I understand why Sony would not want to put that on there, but I also can see how that argument would satisfy a regulator who, could be, yeah, I guess if they wanted to play Xbox games, they would just put this app on here. That's up to Sony. Sony's choosing to not like have Xbox games on their platform when Microsoft would let them. You can dissect that in different ways, but I can see the argument and how you land there. But they're going to make a bunch of this shit exclusive, and what they're going to hinge it on is Game Pass and cloud streaming, and they're going to say if you want that executable, like that native game, like you're not going to get that. And they're going to do that eventually, and they're going to put the screws to all of Activision stuff the same way that they did it with Bethesda, and then they're just going to point to cloud streaming as their get out of jail free card, or get out of regulation free card.
I do think there's an element of I am not sure how much, like at this point and as we move into the future, Microsoft views Sony as its like real target as much either, where like it's like, or at least the console war aspect of it, because as you just pointed out, this is about like the ecosystem and streaming down the road, right? And that's like, it would not surprise me if Microsoft were very content with a settlement where Sony has to become platform agnostic with regard to some Microsoft stuff, and like, sure, we'll let you can have a window, an Xbox app on your PlayStation that lets you access this shit, or we'll let you put a wrapper around xCloud or something, right, for streaming, but like. Because that does increasingly seem to be sort of the brass ring they're going for, is like owning what they see as the future, which is subscription and streaming.
And can you make what by virtue of purchases? Like, can they make the content so appealing that someone like Sony would feel the heat to have to open up their box towards that other stuff? In some ways, devaluing their own. Like Sony's whole proposition is like, we are going to spend tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars building immaculate cinematic single player experiences that have to be all home runs in order for the whole system to work. And
also, by the way, you like them? You don't even need a PlayStation anymore. Please buy them. PC gamers, we love you too.
Yeah. But at least they're like, it's a delayed sort of rollout, right? Yeah. You're going to get that game 2 or 3 years later. Like, by all accounts, the God of War PC port is excellent, and people seem thrilled by it. And so that works in their favor, but it's all part of like a very carefully constructed, calculated way of doing business. That is why people were real mad that Sony didn't like make a sequel to Days Gone, but like, that game was a 7, and like Sony doesn't do 7s. I know people felt it was more than that, but like that's not how Sony felt internally about that game. And like that's just how that's their business model. It's like, we're gonna make very expensive, splashy plays, and you're gonna come here for that. And Microsoft's they're just pointing in a different direction entirely. And so it's interesting.
Yeah, it certainly is. So we will take a break there, and when we come back, I think you and Cado are going to talk about some games and Echoes of the Eye. I have a poodle with an upset stomach. She just got her shots, and so I think, at once she craves being outside and going to the bathroom. On the other hand, she doesn't want to be outside, and she doesn't want to go to the bathroom because she feels weird. So I am going to probably spend the next hour losing feeling in my hands, waiting for this dog to do something.
How cold is it's very cold today. We're in the midst of not quite a cold snap, but I think like the next 48 hours, it's sort of like negative 10.
It's one of those things. It's not that cold, but the wind,
Yeah,
it's just like sucks. It's in the 20s, and then you step outside and it's like immediately like gust of wind comes along and your hand just starts to like burn, and it feels like the skin could just crack apart. So that's the weather we're having, is like just regrettable in terms of we're having a regrettable cold front. All right, so
you should be a meteorologist, Rob. We have a regrettable cold front coming in this weekend. Plan accordingly.
All right, we'll be back after the break with some games and some Echoes of the Eye conversation, so stick around.
And we're back. Cado, let's just think about Elden Ring for like 10 minutes.
Sure.
Just vibrate on.
It's a month away. It's only month away.
It used to be the case that it's very common for companies to send out a press release saying their game had gone gold, which gone gold is at this point, pretty old term, which means that you have created the gold master, which means the game has been quote unquote finished and is off to manufacturing. So the physical discs are being produced. That means jack shit in a world where development continues after those discs are pressed, and in more and more frequently these days, like the games are the version of the game on the disc. If it does run, you wouldn't want to play it. And we're now getting games where the version on the disc may not run until you get like the patch that is, you know, associated with it. And so,
Right. The day one
props to
patch.
Elden Ring for realizing they could just goad some websites into running an Elden Ring story. And also can't blame the websites for like an excuse to hit publish on an Elden Ring story, because it's like the number one pre-order, like the game, the anticipation for the game is like through the roof. And so the people have Elden
Right.
Ring fever, but I just people in a communications people in a meeting were like, I bet we can get some free headlines by saying that game's done. We have no way, Cado, of knowing when that actually happened. That could have happened a month ago, for all we know. Like, it used to be that, like, I remember back in like the Doom days, there was these early versions of blogs that John Carmack and others would do called plan files. And it's because, I wish Brad Shoemaker was here. But like, it was just like a form of blogging. I think it was related to some sort of file structure. I can't remember. But like, you would go to the plan files to see like updates on like a game development. Like, what does John Carmack think about XYZ? And like, the developers would like write that like their game had gone gold or like gotten finished. Like, and that made sense because like they were like logging in to tell you like they finished coding the game. Like, Miyazaki
Right.
is not doing
Like,
that for Elden Ring.
We're done.
It's goofy, but I want Elden Ring. I don't, but I don't, because I have other games I
It
need
does
to play.
technically mean that they could give it to us early, right?
That's true. Yeah, I just
this
I just
point-
feel like I'm waiting for an
Yeah,
email.
you're just
It's
waiting
like,
for code at this
And I was like,
point.
oh, that's that's 30 hours of my life about to go poof. All right. And so I'm actually trying to like finish games in anticipation of
Right.
like a lot of these big games coming. One of them that I finished a week or so back was Halo Infinite, a game that I quite like. I was pretty glowing, and when I wrote about it in a preview form back in last November, when I got around to kind of starting it over again over the holiday, I quite liked the first half of the game.
Nice.
And unfortunately, what I found in the back half is a game that I didn't like nearly as much for two reasons. One, it's kind of just the same thing over and over again. It's like, hey, kind of this biggish space. Do you want to go fight that guy? It's like, okay. Would you like to do that again? Less so. Sorry, we're gonna keep doing that. It feels like a game that had like one really good idea, and then there's just a lot of that.
Right.
And I just didn't find the open space to be particularly compelling at a certain point. It felt repetitive. The combat kind of lost its luster. One of the issues I ran into is you have this hook shot, which is really cool for navigating the space and is very cool in combat. And then you start getting other forms of gear, one of which is kind of like a dash that, if upgraded properly, gives you like a brief bit of camouflage. There is another one that is a portable shield that, if fully upgraded, you can shoot through the shield. And when it's upgraded, you can shoot through the shield and create like electric bullets that travel between multiple enemies. So you can kind of like set yourself up in a spot as like enemies are coming on you and like use that to your advantage. And then the last one, what I basically didn't use outside of like a combat encounter that the game requires you to use it, is like this little doodad that will like show like an outline of the enemies, like in its sphere of detection. So it's like useful if you're fighting like a camouflaged elite, with a
Right.
fancy plasma sword, so you can kind of know where they are. And there's some boss fights that kind of require you to use that so you can track where they are. And that stuff's neat. But getting to those different pieces of gear are like a huge pain in the ass. Like you have to like hit a button on the D-pad to bring up gear select and then switch it to the one you want to use. Cause like the gear button is just one button on the right bumper or whatever. And so what I found is it was like very cumbersome to switch between them. And I don't know how you would do it on the controller, but like I wanted to exist in a world where I'm not using the hook shot and then doing 3 button presses to switch to the dash, but that like I'm using the hook shot and then just pressing another button that like allows me to use the dash. Where like, I don't know if that would be like a
Right.
double click or a hold or something, but like I wanted a world where like I'm using the quick shot and then I'm dashing and sends me into camouflage. And then I'm in camouflage and I'm throwing down the shield. And like I saw how all this gear fits together, and there would be moments where like I was able to string that stuff together, and it made the combat really dynamic and interesting and fulfilling. But I found it like so cumbersome to like to even just remember like where it's like up, down, left, right. So like in the middle of like a really tense, like once you like in the middle of like a really like intense firefight, I would forget and be like, oh well, I just switched over to the wrong fucking gear item, and then I would just abandon like whatever like cool strategy I was trying to do, and then just do the one that got the job done.
That's interesting because in the multiplayer for Halo, the gear's all like it has ammo basically, like it has a certain amount of uses before it disappears, and then you have to go find another piece of gear, and it feels like that was done for balance reasons probably, right? Like just giving everyone all the gear might make things a little too chaotic or like fuck with the flow of a match. But if they're gonna give you all the gear in the single player, it feels like it would have been good to have a way to do a quick swap or to have them on different buttons the way you're talking about. Because yeah, that does sound really like cool as hell. Or even if like sometimes there was like you can sometimes pick up multiple pieces of gear in multiplayer, and you can swap between them. But like again, it's a similar thing. Like you have to. It's not ever a thing where you're using them in tandem, even though it feels like some of them would be really fun to use in tandem.
And that was what I was constantly finding myself. It was like, oh, these feel like they've been implemented as discrete, sort of like, oh, I'm in shield mode, I'm in hookshot mode, and increasingly as I got more comfortable with everything, I was like, oh, actually, like there's like so many cool combinations of things I could do with all of these, but. And again, I'm sure if you played the game enough and you don't have short-term memory issues like I do, that you could, it's not like the game's preventing you. Like again, because like there'd be times where like I would come in, I would throw down, I would start with the shield, and then I would swap over to the dash, or I would use the hook shot, then I would switch to the dash and I'd go camo, and like I could find myself doing that, but like at some point during that sequence, I'd forget which one I was meaning to switch to, would switch to the wrong one, and was like, oh, well, I don't feel cool anymore. I guess I'll just take out the gun and it's just like that is such a differentiating part of like how, like the gear stuff and the hook shot and the bigger spaces, like that's a huge part of what Infinite's trying to be different about. And I just, again, maybe this is just sort of like me, someone who only plays single player, does not play multiplayer, like, just a me concern that like balancing that across the entire game, like and changing the controllers, like the control layout, maybe it wouldn't work. I don't know. I just know that I constantly felt myself like rubbing up against that in a way that was like, like if I could crack this game's like open a little bit, I feel like I could be playing this fundamentally different, where I would just have more options when in combat. This game just has so much combat in the second half, and a lot of it's really good, but it just kind of became. It especially becomes a slog when like the story decides to kick in. Like there's not a whole lot of story in the first half, and then there's a lot of story in the second half, in which almost none of it worked for me. The Halo Infinite does this really weird thing of, in some ways, pretending Halo 4 and 5 don't exist. It doesn't actually do like a story reset. Like it is very firmly set. This is a Halo 6. Like it is set after 4 and 5. The events are in motion, are consequences of every game that's come before it. But it really doesn't bog you down in worrying about what happened before, doing any sort of formal setup for like why you're here, why you should care about any of this stuff. Like just like none of that happens. And it feels like the team dealing with a very real issue, which is like, what do you do with 20 plus years of mythology in which some measure of the audience is been along for the entire ride and cares deeply, but this game specifically feels like it comes so far after even 4 and 5, and people, the audience is so different, especially like a Game Pass situation, that you would want to try and approach it in a way that like anybody could get into this and not feel like they're being left behind, not having cared about the story. But I feel like they could have solved that problem differently by just like doing some more explanation of like why I should care about like any of these characters, why they're here, what are their motivations, and I can't really get into hyper specifics about this without spoiling the end of the game. But I've heard people who have played this game before, like Halo 5, Cortana, the AI that's been spoilers for Halo 5, I guess, if you're like playing through that series now like, because of Infinite, but like the AI, the blue AI Cortana that like has been Master Chief's partner along the whole ride, like goes what is the term called? It's not Berserk, but it's there's like a term.
No, I thought Haywire for a second, but it's not Haywire. It's something else.
Now I'm gonna have to search it.
Rampant.
Yes. I think it's rampant I don't know exactly what all that means, but she's evil. Cortana's bad now, actually. And there's a lot of the second half of this game. So much of the emotions it's playing with are contingent on you caring deeply about the resolution to that relationship. And as someone that has played all of these games, like has at various points, I cared deeply about the Halo story and mythology, but like cared enough, like it was a reason to keep playing. I needed them to do more build up before they wanted to like try and pay that stuff off. I was like, guys, like those games were a long time ago. Like I don't really remember what I'm supposed to be sad about. And the game just sort of at a certain point, well, for one, none of this must make sense to anybody that hasn't played these previous. I was like, you're not like you are doing zero setup for a bunch of people who maybe this was their first time through. And then I think at the same time, even as someone that has a lot of that institutional knowledge, I would have liked a little more setup so I could emotionally sort of like be in the place like, oh, right, like that and that and that. And they do a little bit of that, but I don't know. I think it all falls flat. I don't think it really works. I don't think it feels connected. And it just makes for a very messy narrative where it's very, when you read a little bit of the behind the scenes of how the game was kind of like chopped up in order to get like actually ship after they delayed it. A year and a half ago. I don't know how much of what is here is victim of getting the game to ship. And so it's just like, these are the pieces we have.
Right.
How can we make that work? And that's how you end up here. Or this was like a higher level. This is the kind this is how we want to tell the story of Master Chief and Cortana and, where we're taking this story. And this is actually going to be our philosophical approach from a storytelling perspective. If that's true, it's like more disappointing because I just don't think any of that works. Or just it didn't land. It's kind of like when you watch like a movie and you're like, they're trying to emotionally manipulate me, like the camera movements, what the actors are doing, the music. I see what you're doing, and we'll see if it works. And like a similar thing occurs here, where it's like, oh, I can see all the pieces. Like I see what you're trying to do here. None of it is having any of the intended effect. So
yeah,
that part was a little disappointing. I think all told, I quite liked Halo Infinite, and I think it does, as I said in a previous conversation, I think it just set them up nicely to do some really interesting things going forward. And I'll be curious to see what those are. Plus, if somehow, I think Forge is supposed to come out sometime this year. If like 4-player legendary co-op Halo Infinite plus like Forge fuckery, like there's a lot of cool stuff they can do here. But like where this game ends up is a little bit of a bummer. It's like interesting, but I was not as high on it as I was hoping to be by the end.
Damn.
Yeah.
That multiplayer was fun for the like bit that I played of it, so.
But yeah, people seem to really like it, which that's good. I'm glad.
Yeah, it's got like bad monetization schemes, but the playing feels good.
Yeah, I mean that's like the weird part of video games these days. That is, as someone that their heyday playing multiplayer was prior to things like battle passes and like any form of like getting you to stick around. Like it's hard to not like get a little grumpy and be like, who gives a shit if the battle pass sucks? Like, I played hundreds of hours of Halo multiplayer, earned nothing, and I was happy. It was fine. Like, you know what's good? Competition and dominating the you know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those things like, yeah, like things have just changed. Like this, like the way people play games and like how these games are maintained. But like, I think they should do it right. I think they should do it right. Like, I'm not saying they should. Like, they clearly implemented it poorly. At least they reacted quickly. People seem to me much happier now with it than they were, you know, when the game launched, as it's gone kind of through an early access period, albeit one that I think season 2 doesn't start till May. That's a long. It's a long
time. Part of it, though, is that I was just like the baseline, like how things are gated has changed, right? Like, I felt like it was easier to not, or like, you know, it made more sense to not have a battle pass, obviously, before the concept existed, I guess. So reductive, a weird way of saying that sentence. But the point being, like, you could get all the like armor colors or what, like you could customize just because it was fun to customize, and like that is now what's in it. So if that's going to be locked away, people still want access to those things. The way you dole it out has to be right.
Yeah,
people are
for sure.
Mad, right?
Yeah,
like
and that also is just one of those things where I'm glad. Well, I guess the team at Microsoft should be glad that the base level Halo Infinite multiplayer is as well liked as it is, because all the stuff surrounding it seemed like a complete disaster. Again, it's good that they responded quickly, but it's like it's not like they were blazing new trails with how they to do battle pass and like lots of games have figured this out, or like have things you can look towards that Halo could have just copied and pasted and everyone would have been just fine. And so for the game to have been in such rough shape in terms of the progression on top of it, again, this is in no ways like a lazy dev sort of thing. It was just sort of shocking at like the state it was in at the time that it arrived, given that there are plenty of examples of other games like you could have just taken that stuff kind of like whole cloth and people would have been much happier. And it seems like they're in a better state there. And my guess is like when they get around to, you know, season 2 will probably be like the proper season 1, and like people will be much chapier, and at least the base game is good enough that it'll probably get people to May before you know it. But yeah, so yeah, I'm curious. And hey, look, if they put on a big expansion for Halo Infinite, I'll be there day one. I liked enough of what they were doing. Put me in like snowy. I needed like more biomes. Like it was all just sunny green mountains. I was like, give me some snow.
There's snow in that first one, isn't there? I feel like I've seen different biomes from that first game. Yeah, well, I think in the Bloomberg report, Jason Schreier's reporting on like what the game was before. Was it Joseph Staten came in? Like the game had like 3 other big areas with different biomes. Like so, like that stuff exists in some form. Yeah. And my guess is that'll be stuff they repurpose for expansions and things like that. The one before we are towards the end here. Maybe we'll do the outro and then we'll just do a spoilery thing. Is it? I guess for you, Cado, does it make sense to do the spoiler section and then an outro, or should we do the outro and then just do the spoiler section after that? I don't know. I think like before is fine.
Okay,
because I put the timestamps in there, so people can skip ahead.
That's true, and it's at the very end, so it's basically like we're doing the outro. Before we're going to talk about Echoes of the Eye. Cado has started and finished that, and so we're going to do a whole big thing on that. But the last thing I wanted to point out was I had seen this pointed out in Simon Carless, who is an ex Gamasutra. Well, I guess I think they're game developer now. The much better name than Gamasutra. He puts out an excellent newsletter about game sales, game sort of like marketing analysis. It's just really fascinating to understand like why games take off, especially on places like Steam and YouTube and Twitch. There's this game called Vampire Survivors that basically had no sales in December when it launched, and then is now I think is one of the most popular games on Steam. It seems because it's like Northern Lion like did a YouTube, which is like how a lot of these things start. Like a YouTuber YouTube creator. I hate the term YouTuber. A YouTube creator.
You don't like
made a video.
tubers?
Yeah,
Not a fan of potatoes.
No. Did a video, and Northern Lion specifically is like known for playing roguelikes like Binding of Isaac and things like that. And so like when Ryan comes down and says like, hey, this is a good one to pay attention to, those games tend to spike. And Simon's initial takeaway was that maybe that's what happened with this game. So anyway, Vampire Survivors is a game that fucking loves Castlevania so much. Just like, I love Castlevania. It is a roguelike mashed up with elements of what would you call them? Clickers, right? Or what was that kind of genre called? Like the cookie clicker and stuff like that. The
idle games,
idle games. Yes, yeah. I think there's a lot of different names. But yes, we'll use idle games for the purpose of this conversation. So you pick from a couple different characters that have like different starting characteristics. Top down 2D game. Let's just go with the base level character that you get at the start before you can unlock anything else. Looks very much like a Simon Belmont. He has a whip, except that you do not attack with that whip. The whip just attacks automatically to your right on a cooldown. Like, it is just occurring. All you can do is move the character. You can just move them in the space. And so you will very quickly have enemies coming in around you, and you are like lining up those attacks, so it'll take out the enemies as they surround you. They drop little blue crystals. As you pick up the blue crystals, that fills an experience meter. When that experience meter levels up, then you will get a roll of the dice on different things you can do with your character. You can maybe you'll be able to upgrade the whip so it does more, increases its DPS. Maybe it'll be the kind of thing where it does more base damage. Or more likely, you're going to probably start stacking different weapons that are doing different things, such as, and again, these are all ripoffs of weapons and items from Castlevania. Like one of them is the blue potion that you can throw that can create a pool of damage on the ground. So if you pick that one, just at regular intervals, like blue potions are going to fall from the sky and create little like patches of damage. You could have a wizard staff that is like shooting like homing darts. You're not picking where those darts are going, but it's gonna go somewhere. You can have like the Bible that like circles around you and acts as kind of like a shield in Castlevania. Like you can have that surrounding you here. And so it like is this game with like really, really basic mechanics. Like you are just moving. Your ultimate goal is to guide a character through a space, dodging the equivalent of like bullet hell enemies, and racking up. God. Are you looking at screenshots now?
I was just looking at a video.
Yes.
There are so many enemies and bullets and fires on the screen. Like what?
The game is pure noise and chaos. You are just overwhelmed almost immediately from the jump. And it is so basic in its design, but so it's a beautiful game. Like I've played like 2 full runs. I've survived once 18 minutes and I think one 15 minutes, which is pretty decent for like your first couple runs. And then, it has a lot of things you'd expect from a game like this, where you get currency that you take over to the next set of runs, where you can upgrade some base level stats, like what health you start with, like increase your luck element. Like one of the ways that luck plays into the game is when you level up, you get 3 options of things to pick from. And if you increase your luck stat, you get a chance to have 4 things to choose from. So maybe you'll get the one that you really want because you're trying to like scale a build in a certain direction. And you get other characters that start with different weapons. Like maybe you prefer a certain type of build that you want to scale to really quickly. And it's just extremely basic. The game looks like noise in screenshots and video form, but I highly recommend people check it out. It's $3. It's in early access. It's already delightful, and I can only imagine it's like so easy to see where they're going to build out things from here. Like, it already has like a couple of stages that you can like have different enemy types that you deal with. I feel like this is the kind of game that I'm going to play like 2 or 3 more hours of and go, okay, like I'll see you in 6 months and see where it's at then. But
see you when you go 1.0 or whatever.
yeah, I mean, maybe I don't think this is a game that's ever going to have a story mode. So nor does it have. It's just a game of, it's got real like kind of Geometry Wars vibes. Like, you're just trying to survive as long as possible. And I have found that part to be really enjoyable so far. So that's Vampire Survivors. It's on Steam at the moment.
It looks like at least in the most busy of these screens, it looks like you're a boss from a bullet hell game.
Sure.
Like shooting out a million projectiles in all directions.
I mean, like, like one of the ways I was scaling the most recent build I did was the game. So there are like kind of boss level enemies or like mini boss level enemies that appear on the screen. They'll either be like bigger than an average enemy or like have like a colored outline around them, and they take a lot longer to kill. But you want to kill them as soon as possible because they drop treasure. When they drop treasure, they drop a bunch of upgrades that you would normally get through leveling up. And so for some reason, the drops I kept getting were for these knives that shot forward out from me. And they're very useful because they, like, for example, so a lot of the way the game is tricky is that, all right, so your whip is only going to the right. And so, it's not, I don't think it's directionally focused. So it's like if you're going up, it's still hitting to the right. And so that kind of makes it a little, like how you're lining up your character is a little awkward and different. These knives shoot forward in the direction you are pointing the analog stick or what you're doing with the keyboard. And so you can kind of like cut through enemy lines by just like do. And so I kept increasing the knives stat, which allowed it to like go through multiple enemies. And I was also it was called like Open Bible or something like that. But basically it decreased my cooldowns. So I was like firing the knives more frequently. And then I was also, I forget what the upgrade was, but it basically like increases the size of the weapon. And so like I had these knives that were like bigger than my character, basically like shooting forward and like just taking out dozens of enemies in front of me while simultaneously like one of the common weapons in Castlevania is the axe that you kind of like throw in an arc. And that occurs here. And so they're just like, your character is just like my character is like throwing 70 knives in a direction I'm running in. And then like 4 axes are just like spitting out above my head and just flying wherever, like just complete nonsense. But you're like trying to set your character build up so they can like account for doing damage and creating experience drops in as many directions as possible. Right. And it's just a weird game.
That's another thing to mention. The enemies are coming from literally every section, everywhere. Or like they're covering the entire screen. Everywhere. It's almost like a Muso where you're a projectile, like shoot 'em up boss. Just
I think I think that is definitely it has strong 2D Dynasty Warriors vibes for sure. So I definitely recommend people check that out. And then before we get out of here, let's talk about Echoes of the Eye, a game, an expansion to Outer Wilds. Outer Wild, I will never get that.
Outer Wilds.
Right. Outer Wilds. The Outer Wild. The Outer Wilds.
The Outer Worlds.
The Outer Wilds. I know.
Outer Wilds doesn't have. Is it the? No, it's just Outer Wilds, right?
I don't know, dude. Doesn't matter. It's not. Like you could tell me yes, and then I won't remember on the next podcast. But a game that we all at Waypoint, beloved. Austin has an excellent review up on the site that you should, if you've never read, you should go read for that original game. And then Echoes of the Eye, an expansion that fits into the base game. So it's not as though you're like launching it separately or experiencing separately. You to play the expansion, you're starting from the same intro, the same loop for the main game, but just kind of jutting off to go experience this spaceship called the Stranger that essentially is like its own little world inside of that. I guess before we get into spoilers, so that we can talk openly, I came out of it thinking it was deeply flawed, but exceedingly brilliant and well worth playing despite my reservations. And I'm curious where you came down on it.
Yeah, no, similar. I feel like I had less trouble with certain elements that people have had trouble with.
Mm-hmm.
We can get into details once we get into the spoiler section. But I, loved that game. Wasn't sure why they thought it needed a DLC. Went in kind of skeptical, just like, what could even happen here? But it's like, of course, they made the first game. The people who made that game know what they made and have added to it in a beautiful way. I think, like, if you have any reservations about, like, but I finished that game and you know what the end of the original game is, and you think that there can be no more. I say this is still worth checking out. Like, it doesn't really change that in any way other than to add more side information, I think. But it's like really, I still think really touching in the same way that the base game is,
All right. Well, if you don't want to be spoiled for Echoes of the Eye, then now is the time to
slash the base game too, I guess.
Yeah, I think we're just gonna go full spoilers for the entire game, so we can kind of speak openly about where that fits in. Because yes, like, you almost can't talk about the DLC without. If we're gonna do spoilers, then we're gonna be discussing the implications for like the whole world, because it absolutely adds a lot of interesting layers to what you perceive to be happening in that base game. So for those people who are gonna leave, goodbye. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Everyone else who wants to stick around, we're gonna get into spoilers for Echoes of the Eye right now. Yeah, dude, there are. I mean, putting aside like the lore stuff, the amount of there are at least so when you discover the secret world, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a oh fuck moment.
Yeah.
That makes you completely reconsider everything that's in front of you.
Yep.
The moment you realize that world is virtual is another.
Yeah, that fucked me up. Oh, they made the fucking bird matrix over here.
They
God
did.
Damn it.
And then the third of realizing that when you set the lamp down and go out of a certain range, that you can then just see the matrix was like,
oh my God.
So many games would kill for one of those moments. And there are multiple, like, makes you recontextualize everything around you moments in an expansion to a game that already has a bunch of those moments.
They kind of distilled all of the like layered reveals that they did so well in the base game into another like 10 hours of just more of that type of knowledge building.
Yes.
They're just so clever with the way like everything is there. You're gonna find it in a certain order just by virtue of what you know. But when you go back on like the last loop, once you have all the knowledge, you can go straight to do the things, right? Like, it's so clever, and it's like nothing's changed. It's like the rumor map on your ship updated, but technically everything is the same as the first time you stepped in there, and that's still like such a baffling thing that they pulled that off in a 22-minute time loop, and it works so well each time. And like the subtle ways where like the thing about putting down your lamp in the digital world, where like that space is very dark. You have a lamp; it is your only light source. Why would the player ever want to put it down for any reason when there's scary shit? Never. Until you fucking
if someone must exist. You are out there.
Yeah.
Because again, this game, unlike most video games, does not gate a feature behind actual.
Yeah.
Like noted progress, like getting to a level, like upgrading, defeating enough Castlevania enemies to collect gems and like level up. Like, you can, in theory, from the moment you get into this game, like begin like visualizing that secret world in its Matrix version, which I presume would actually make like parts of the game like significantly easier if you like knew that from the jump. But I have to imagine people found it by accident. And like, who are
absolutely.
you? What was that experience like when you had this revelation, but then didn't even know what to do with that information, right? Like, imagine discovering that and being like, wow, like this is like a real
it's happening.
They Live moment, like like this. Except that They Live, he knows he's supposed to look like this. Is like accidentally you put on. What if you accidentally put on sunglasses and found out the world had been invaded by aliens? Like that. I don't know if I'd like that information. Like delete.
I have to ask. Did you end up? So one of the things that people complain a lot about in this game is the stealth mechanics.
Yep.
Which feels understandable, but I don't know. So the first, I kind of did these in order. There's kind of a semi-natural order where like, we should explain actually. Well, I mean, if you're listening to this, you probably already know what is going on. But just in case you for some reason are a weird spoiler, the premise is you're going onto this ship called the Stranger. It is a ring ship where like a Halo, right? There's
very
like
Halo. I was playing those games. I was playing these games pretty close to one another. I was like, oops.
Whoa.
One has a gun and one doesn't.
Yeah. There's basically a river along which there's different kind of zones set aside the river, and at the end / beginning of the river there's a big old dam, and at a certain point that dam breaks and things at those other points change, and there's kind of a natural flow to like where you enter and then making the whole loop around to back to the dam. And so once you get to the first area, there is in each of these areas, there's a place you can enter the bird matrix through a little campfire. And one of the things that you have to do is in each of the matrix versions of these areas is find a specific room that has some information. The first one, or like the first one, if you do them in order, the first one gives you, I think, the information about the placing the lamp down, if I'm remembering correctly. After I learned that information, number 2 and 3, which also had stealth sections where like there were birds, walking around and they could spot you.
Well, birds that have birds that if I remember like the lore correctly, birds that had walked outside of the zone and then lost their mind, right? Or is it their physical bodies die and they're trapped?
No, it's their physical, yes.
Their physical bodies die and then they go, their copy is stuck in the digital world.
Yeah, in the digital world because their physical bodies don't exist. Which also means that you can't be woken up. That was a whole other, that trick was very fun. You had to kill yourself at the end. You had to die on the fire in order to figure out one of the last puzzles.
I did not figure that out on my own. I read that one, but it was so clever that I wasn't even mad. I was like, oh, that's good. That's just I just know that that's always the tier of puzzle that my brain is not going to put together. So I don't even get mad. It's just like I'm just impressed. Game, that's just good.
You got me. Oh, but it was no. The one that I had to look up ended up being the final bridge puzzle, the invisible bridge. For some reason, I just didn't think to ever step outside of the range there. Even though what I was doing for the other stealth sections before I had gotten to the point where I was like unlocking the secret chest at the end, for this, I put down the lamp immediately and walked out, and then you can just see where everyone is like really easily because it's super fucking bright, and that made the stealth like a million times easier. Like I would have ripped my hair out actually doing that in the dark. Which is what most people did, Cado. Right. This is the thing. It's like I feel like getting that information in that order helped a lot.
Yeah, because I think for most people they discovered that revelation really late in the game, and where it's most useful is when you have to follow, like the creatures. I forget what their names are in the game. Do we learn? Is there a way to learn their language? Side note, still irritated about this. Like, I cannot believe that at any point you didn't get a way to read the writing. Like, that was like one of the coolest.
True, though? Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I didn't. Did you?
I didn't either. This is what I was asking. I was wondering.
No,
if
I'm pretty sure I
there
read
was
that as
some
a
way and we
complaint. It
missed
was like, no, I just think that's just not in there, and I found that to be
I think that's
really frustrating.
I think that's funny because the only reason the Hearthians have deciphered Nomai is because it's the thing that exists in the solar system, and they've sent multiple people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
To bring stuff. Like it's a funny thing because it keeps pulling it out, and I'm like, get away! I don't need. Yeah, like I can't. Fucking. I turned off the thing because there's a setting in the settings you can turn on automatically equip when you're looking at alien
right
thing, and it's like I turned that off because it's like, oh, I'm never gonna figure this out probably. I would be curious if there is some secret way where
I have to imagine that it's not gibberish. I have to imagine.
No, it's definitely. I believe that it is real language, and I just think that it's very funny that the Hearthian translator just doesn't know what to do with it because they've never this is the first time anyone knows that these aliens have been in the solar system.
Oh, I guess my thought was I wonder if there is a way for people to reverse engineer it. Like I wonder if there's enough information in the DLC for people to figure out what that stuff
totally
has to say. I mean, they basically, even though it doesn't have what the base game used as a way of communicating a lot of its narrative. I mean, it just comes up with a different one, right? Like it's just like these reels that you find are just the game's nonverbal version of the same exact thing. Is like, how do we give you some out of context like clues also, about what's happening?
Shout outs to slide reels. I don't know how many episodes ago that was where I was like, my most useless object in my room right now is this slide projector.
That was the holiday. That was the holiday mailbag, I think, when people asked that.
Look, they're useful for passing on information.
They're useful to create propaganda machines around your society that has devolved into a cult and then completely lost their minds. So I do think people like you having that information for the stealth section. The point I was making before I got distracted by the language stuff was that sequence where you're following like a series of the creatures go into was it like a church or something, and then you have to wait for the water to come through and sweep them away so that you can walk through the fireplace. And so I think for most people that's like their first application of that, because that seems like how the game would. It's like it's a completely dark area that's hard to navigate. Walking away would give you a clear understanding of how to follow that stuff. But if you knew all that stuff, of course that would make earlier sections a lot easier or more manageable. But there's also a reason why they put in a toggle in the settings to like make those sections less frustrating, because I don't think that's how most people went through them. And even with the toggle, I'm glad that I mostly navigated them on my first try, because I love horror games. I love them spooked. But I don't like doing that on a time limit and having to get back to this spot again. Just that was not what I was looking forward to. And so that's where the irritation came from. And I just tried to. So for those sections in particular, I always had a guide open where it's like, I'll do the thing up until the point where I don't know what to do. But then I'm going to look up what to do so that I can just get to the next bit.
Yeah. So I didn't end up having as much frustration as I've seen people have with that and the I could see how if you're trying to get something but you're not this game has kind of like two modes that it's in this DLC. It's like one is exploratory, you're safe, nothing's coming to get you. The only real danger is falling from a tall height. And then there is these moments where the birds are wandering around in the Matrix simulation world, and they will catch you and send you back to the bonfire, which is funny.
Well, and it's the only time that occurs in this entire game, right? Like having them. I mean, there are things that can hurt you in this game. You can take fall damage. You can run out of oxygen. You can run out of fuel. You can when you go to Dark Bramble, like there are
Yeah.
those creepy, fish,
Anglerfish.
space enemy. Like, so there is some of that stuff, but this is the most explicit the game gets in, like, no, there is an enemy that is hunting you, and wants you to leave. Which I think also that has contributed to some people bouncing off it. Is like, just tonally is like, that's not what I thought I was here for. Like, Outer Wilds can be creepy, but it is not scary. And like, this was, way more in the, one of my favorite moments in the game is when, one of the first times that I made it to the other side, to the Matrix world, and you hear them walking,
fucking
the thuds.
Footsteps, God.
So for people who haven't played it, like there's this essentially like all of the, in a certain section, all these like zombified or whatever, like disconnected versions of these creatures, they're all on the top floor, and there's no way for you to access that top floor, but you can get to the floor underneath. And you spend quite a bit of time like going back and forth and exploring and putting together the layout and kind of figuring out what you would do in this area. And you just hear like,
Yep.
Fuck, I don't like this at all. I thought that was incredibly effective.
Yeah.
And
did you notice the elevator plates?
Yes.
There's just like all these places where like, oh, eventually there'll be an elevator here. That's
don't like
that.
I kept thinking, oh, are they on some sort of movement path that's going to bring them down to where I am? So I constantly thought it was a really effective way of scaring the player by not doing anything at all. Like it's all atmosphere, and it's all the player's imagination doing the hard work for the designer, in which I don't know what the capabilities are. I don't even know what's up there. At that point, you don't even know that it is like detached bird people. Like, it could be anything up there. Like, all you know is you can hear the footsteps, and they seem loud and they seem creepy, and they're not that far away. And you start trying to fill in the blanks on like what they are capable of. And eventually that starts to wear off when like I've come through for the 8th time and I've never run into anything. Like, okay, there's clearly going to be a moment when shit hits the fan, and I can like not worry about what's happening here as much. But then of course that moment when it does hit the fan, where you trigger like all the elevators like going on,
all the
and
elevators,
and you see them
all
going down. I'm like, oh no. I don't like any of this. And I can absolutely see certain people looking at that moment and going like, I'm done. Like, this is not the game I signed up for.
Out. That one in particular, that one with all the elevators, where like all of a sudden there's like 3 or 4 of them in that area. I guess I think it's like 3.
Mm-hmm.
Is the one that I use the lantern trick the most on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just walked around in full, and like that's also one of the ways I figured out what their radius is. It's actually super small unless you focus your light. They only find you at a distance if you focus your light, and then they like walk to your last known. But basically, if you consider like that lamp, like lantern area around you when you're not focusing your lamp, that's kind of their exact like area of effect. That's
I wondered if some people ran into issues where like I picked up on that pretty fast because I've played a lot of games like this, and I played a lot of horror games, so like I have a pretty foundational understanding of like how the AI patterns usually work in games like this. And I like you picked up, even without the trick, like picked up pretty fast. It's like, oh, like just, keep the lantern up really bright. And then as soon as you see someone, like turn that shit off and like move 3 steps to the left and you'll probably be okay.
Right.
Again, I don't know how much that changes when you don't have the switch, like the option they have in the menu. I genuinely don't even know what that changes in the game. Like, I guess I could look it up, but I know it's there to like reduce frustration.
Right.
And I can't remember the language especially, but like there is some language in there that's like, we did design the game the other way. I guess you can turn this on. And I was like, that's not like, fuck off, man. Like, I can feel that that's like a designer, well, I guess these people don't like how we designed it. I guess we'll put this option in here, but this is the way we designed it. And so, well, come on, man. Like, just let people make the switch and don't make me feel bad while I do it. But it is there. And I flipped it on like the first time after I got caught and was just like, I don't want to do that again. And then I don't know if it was that I just better understood the layout and how to avoid them, or if it was the option that I changed, but I never got caught after that. It was able to
I wonder what that does.
I guess I could just look. So just speculating.
I like how they did a similar bait and switch with this DLC as they did with kind of the base game, where when you start, at least I had this thought, and I'm sure a few other people probably did as well, where when the supernova loop starts, part of me was like, I'm gonna figure out what's causing the supernova and stop it. Like that is the point. And so when I entered this a stranger, I had a similar moment of like, oh, I guess at some point I'll figure out how to stop that dam from overflowing. And it is absolutely not. And I just thought that was a very funny moment of like, oh, remember when we did this the first time? Turns out same people made this one again. They have similar tricks, but
okay. I found out this is like really interesting. So this is from on the Outer Wilds Reddit from it's Crossboy explaining exactly what happens. And so they write, in the DLC there are stealth sections. Alien creatures patrol certain areas that you need to sneak by. Normally if they see you, they will turn on their lights to get a better look at you, creep up slowly, then charge you with a scary sound effect very quickly. Spooky music starts playing and you get killed. With this setting on, it's called reduced frights is the option. They will no longer turn on their lights. That means they will only see you if you have your light on. Secondly, they will no longer charge you. Instead, they walk very slowly towards you. It's quite easy to avoid them like this. Finally, if they do catch you, no scary music and no creepy sound effects will play. They still kill you, but the animation leading into it is much more gentle and not scary at all. The quote killing animation is just them blowing out a candle you're holding. So that actually explains. But when I said, "Well, I never got caught the second time," what?
Is that not the regular animation?
I think the blowing out the candle happens no matter what. So I think they might be wrong there.
Right.
But I think that might explain when I said like, well, then second time through, I just never got caught. Well, yeah, because all these things prevented that from happening. But I enjoyed it. Like I still found these sections like tense and spooky, and I got some of what they were going for out of it, but it didn't lead into frustration. And so like in terms of me getting what I wanted out of the game relative to what the designers, artists, and programmers are going for, like I found a happier balance there with that option turned on.
Yeah, because it sounds like it doesn't change that much, just how easy it is to get caught.
Yeah, it's just an easy mode for stealth is basically.
Yeah.
And they still kill you, right? Like I think it'd be, they could have made it so that I don't know, they just like they can't. They just like there's things that stalk the area, but they don't actually manifestly impact you. But they kept that in. So
right. I found it really interesting what they decided to kind of focus on for the sort of narrative beats of this, and the idea of like information, passing on information, and the way that kind of ties in with the original ending. I thought was really interesting. What did you think about like what these aliens were like? What their like point, not point, but like goal was, right?
Well, it's like the whole setup for them is like incredibly sad. Like you get to see, like they essentially have cursed knowledge for like what is going right. Like it's like they. I'm trying to remember like the different things that you see. Like they essentially see that the object is there. Like they know that doom is coming, right? Like isn't that like, and they build the stranger in order to like capture the energy, and are able to sort of like delay the inevitable until the presence of the what do they call that in the original? The anomaly or whatever.
They sense the eye, which is
Yep.
also what the Nomai sense. That brings them to this solar system where the eye is like closest to. And then they understand that the eye is there to reset the universe essentially, right? Like they understand it as an end and decide to try to stave it off.
Fair. And they do so by like mining the like the planet that they live on, turning that into the stranger, building this halo, and then being sad that they no longer have their beautiful home planet, and so their solution to that is to build a virtual one that they go into, and like, well, we'll just live out our days in virtual reality while the world keeps on going. It's like a really like they won, but then like is one of the, at what cost? Like a really sad situation.
And then also throughout, you're trying to figure out they've hidden something, right? They've hidden something, and they've hidden it super well. They've locked it up, and it's like, what could it be? Like, what is in there?
Yeah, what could be so fucking like? And they lock it up in this Dark Souls ass looking ritual.
Actually, I was gonna say Destiny. It has like these Destiny hive chains. Like if you've played Destiny and you know like the chains with hive runes on them that lock doors a bunch of times in that game, it's almost exactly that. It's these rituals to lock it up.
You don't want to open this thing. Everything about this, the structure is screaming.
Part of me was like, should I? I guess it's the only thing left to do.
Yeah, my feeling like halfway through The Stranger was like, oh, the missing piece of information from the story in Outer Wilds is like, I'm responsible for everything. Turns out when I came to The Stranger, I released some sort of cosmic demon. Galactus emerged from his cage and then, ate everything. They really go out of your way. I mean, it's part of the broader like horror overtones of the entire DLC, and that thing is just staring at you the entire time. I mean, like it starts out with you, there's a structure that is underwater. Like it's not even like above ground. They put that shit underwater. Like no, like get down there. And even when you get inside and like go up the stairs and like it's like locked away in a different thing, and it's just it's horrifying. Makes you not want to open it. But then of course, like the resolution to all that is, a tragedy in and of itself. I was trying to figure out, correct me if I'm wrong on how this plays out, but basically if I remember from the way, when you see the slides on this, there's one person like part of this, this species that like wakes up or like takes themselves out of the virtual reality, turns off the device that is like keeping the eye under control. They are then cornered by everybody else in their society and then locked away into this because everyone else wants to go back to being hooked on the Matrix and moving forward. And then is the stranger hit by like is that a consequence of this one person deciding to turn off the safety protections, or was that going to happen regardless?
It feels a little bit like that. The bits of the stranger that are breaking at this point are it's because there's no one left alive. Right. They stayed in too long. Right. And this is kind of where my reading of the sort of situation goes on is like they decided, basically this species has decided that the end of the universe, which they can see happening, but from my reading of the original ending of the game, is part of the natural progression of the way the universe works, right? It's about a cycle of renewal, death, and creation. Like the original Outer Wilds kind of lets you in on the moment of creating the next version of the universe as a kind of like, like it's okay, things end. Like people die, new people are born, things go on in cycles, but you have to let things end for there to be something new. this one was the idea of a society who decided, but we don't want things to end, right?
Mhm.
We're going to make the bird matrix because we also don't want to die. We figure out that we can just stick our brains in there and live forever. And they stay in there, and then there's no one to upkeep the ship, and just through there's random shit in space. Things start to break down. Eventually this would have happened anyways because the supernova that goes off in Outer Wilds is a separate event from going to the eye of the universe and restart and
because
the new universe.
The implication of the story in Echoes of the Eye is that the Nomai go off and they stumble upon the Eye and all these events completely separately from this other species and actually overlap and have consequences for one another because of their independent events. Because the stranger is invisible, it's hiding in plain sight. But it was it's not like anyone was aware that this thing was even floating around or was was a tool intended for a certain use.
No, yeah, and the way that the DLC plays out is this is the stranger is almost like an expanded version of the Quantum Moon from the original game.
Yeah,
where it was something that, if you're just trying to explore as much as possible, you will end up seeing, but is technically optional in the progression of the game. You don't ever actually need to go to the Quantum Moon and meet the one Nomai that's left there. You can finish the game without ever seeing them. It's better when you do meet them because it's really cool to talk to them and have this exchange. And it makes the end they're there at the ending as well, which is really beautiful and touching. And apparently this is what the stranger does too.
Yeah.
At the end, the prisoner is there also and is helping to make the new universe. But yeah, it's just it feels like they slid it in so naturally where someone playing this for the first time, it's gonna be really fun to hear about people randomly running into this invisible ship in the middle of nowhere, because it is just there. It is there. You can just run into it on accident probably if you're going somewhere else. Although it seems like the path of it is a little bit less likely to happen if you're just exploring the rest of the solar system. But yeah. In the end, the prisoner is the one who turns off the thing because the idea
this shit's
there
fucked
is
up,
just
guys. I don't know. I don't think we should be doing that. I think
we're fucking with
bad.
we're fucking with nature in a way that no one should really be fucking with nature. We're putting off a natural, what's the word I'm looking for? Not system, but process.
Also, if you had this information, there's other people out there. You could have told them. This could have been a community effort. But why? As the galaxy could have decided together. What should we do about this problem? Instead, you cocooned yourself off in this. I guess we don't have a sense of the time scale. Or I don't know when. How long have they been floating out there? Hundreds of years?
No, more, because they arrive before the Nomai. They do their whole thing before the Nomai, and then after the Nomai, after the prisoner unlocks the eye, that's when the Nomai hear the signal. Is that second time?
Right.
Also, quick note: there were 4 solar systems that they showed. I don't think they're gonna do another DLC, but for a second there, I really thought they were implying that they might, because unless I missed some piece of lore that would explain this, but there was when they show the eye emanating these rays, there's 4 solar systems. One is the Harthian solar system, one is the Nomai solar system, and one is the Strangers. I don't think we ever get a species name for them, do we?
Well, no, because we don't get any text related.
We don't get any
to them.
text. No, yeah. And then there was a 4th one in the upper left corner that also had planets and stuff. And it's that feels a little too detailed to just be background. And there's other planets in the universe that heard the signal. They haven't said anything about more DLC.
I would be shocked.
Yeah.
This game has one of the all-time perfect endings. I'm genuinely shocked that they managed to add such layers of complexity to the existing already perfect story in a way that makes it more interesting, but also is not. It's not so frequently when you do expansions that are gonna like add to the lore. It's like time to answer questions that we didn't answer before, and like none of that happens here. Like none of these were questions that people were asking because you didn't know that to ask the question in the first place.
You didn't know it happened. It didn't matter. It's not about
and it's irrelevant.
plot.
It's irrelevant. Like it's incredibly relevant, you know, like in the sense that like it has an impact and like is responsible, you know, for certain things occurring along the timeline we've already experienced. But it's not one of those. It's just a beautiful little story that
it's another.
It enriches what we already know, but is not required. Like you could. You know, if all you want to do is play the original game and not even fuck with a stranger, like you're still getting a beautiful game and you'll have missed out on, you know, I'm not saying nothing. I'm not saying like this isn't important, but I mean like they are complete experiences that work in tandem, but are not required as a whole.
It's like my favorite type of like Star Wars side story. It's like this does not matter to the quote unquote plot of what happens. It is telling you something new about the universe. Like, oh, this is how this other completely unrelated to these first two species, this is the third species, how their society reacted to the knowledge of the eye of the universe existing and what was going to happen eventually with the eye of the universe, right? It's like when faced with the ultimate like end of everything, what did that society do?
Cursed knowledge is my feeling on that. How about I don't know? Because I feel like knowing is almost always going to lead you towards making disastrous decisions.
This is definitely what happens here.
That's just not human nature. That's just nature. That's alien nature. Whatever how you want to describe it. Like. You know, it is natural to want to continue to exist. That is, yes. You know, The Outer Wilds is a story about essentially grappling with the existential, crisis of like, we don't know if there's an after. And it's like, okay, well, what does it mean if the after is not you existing after, but it is other things existing after? Like, how do you reconcile your place in that? And I think it was really interesting because Outer Wilds even though Nomai, like it's all like chill and positive, baby. Like it's just like it's generally people being either ignorant to the point of not knowing their place in all of this, or even once knowing, generally accepting of what comes next. And I thought this adds a really interesting wrinkle to the variety of reactions. Because of course there'd be people who'd be like, fuck that.
That's gotta like it's even originally a lot of players' initial reaction is like, how do we stop the end, right?
Well, this is how video games. The stranger is in a different video game. We build the stranger and we bottle it up, and then there's a post-credit scene that shows the metal cracking, and it's like, oh no, we're gonna lose control of the eye. See you in Outer Wilds 2.
Oh god, but no, it's great, and I'm like this close to I'm holding up my fingers, but you can't see because my camera's not up. To like just playing that game through again to see the prisoner at the end and say hello.
I looked up a YouTube video to rob me of my interest in that because I thought about it too, but then I also remembered how many times I fucked up the run in Dark Bramble. And I was like, I don't want to do that again.
Well, I would want to go see Solanum. I forget their name. The last Nomai, and then make a final run so that everyone's there at the end. Well, do you have to actually talk to all the Hearthians to get them to show up?
I think so.
Okay, I would. Yeah, that's fine. I'd go say hi to everyone first. That game is it's so good. It's so good. And I'm glad that this DLC ended up like just fitting right in and just feeling it's not necessary, but almost like so natural an addition really to what they had with the base game.
Yeah, agreed. Makes me very excited to see what what that team does
Yeah.
next.
Oh my god, yeah.
And I guess I would say I hope it's not a sequel to Outer Wilds, but I also would have said I don't need a DLC to Outer Wilds. So
Right.
whatever that team wants to do, slap a 2 on that bad boy and send me back to the eye. I trust you have a good reason to take me there. And that is going to take us to the end of this podcast. That's a wrap on today's episode of Waypoint Radio. If you want more from Waypoint, you can follow us on Twitter at Waypoint. Follow us on Facebook and YouTube at Waypoint Vice. You can follow. Oh no! I'm trying to see. I don't look at this document all the time, so I'm trying to jump to the things that Rob needs me to read. Like our theme music is by Bowen. The track is "Miss You" off the EP Pale Machine. Learn more at waypoint.zone/Bowen. I don't have it here,
B-O-E-N.
but shout outs to Too Mellow for the baller. Cado, you're gonna have to add it to your repertoire.
Yes, I'll grab that.
Too Mellow did. He did what I guess I need to realize more often that when I put a call into the world that I can manifest it. But on the last podcast, Rob did another one of his famous here's another fucking old ass video game that I started playing for no real rational reason. And I wanted there to be a moment where we got to guess what that is, and I wanted some music to go with it. And Too Mellow delivered. So if you go check out their Twitter account, or if you pull up mine, you'll be able to see a retweet of that. It's delightful. So
good old Rob No Pegs Acne.
100% segment. What's a segment?
Love it.
You can follow me at Patrick Clubbeck. Where can people follow you, Cado?
At _Cado_appears.
This week, we're doing a part final of Cado and Rob playing High Fleet on Twitch on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we will have the episode of Manhunting with GFW Radio's Jeff Green. Also my canonical father, Jeff Green, talking about it's before your time, Cado, but super fans they'll know what that means.
Wow.
Talking about Michael Mann's TV series, right? Crime Story is a TV series.
Yes,
I think I have that right. That'll come out on Wednesday. On Thursday, we'll be doing another episode of Waypoint Radio, in which I think Cado will be able to talk about a game he was looking forward to. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say what that game is, but feel free to crack the code. Code Busters. If you can solve it's
not that hard.
Outer Wilds DLC, you can solve that one. Look, Cado, I got an email today.
Put games that Cado wants to play that are coming out at the end of the week.
Cado, I got an email this weekend from a PR person attached to a code that said, part of the requirements was no defamation. And I was like, do
you know?
In general, as part of my job, I tried to avoid defaming people. Anything. That's, from what I understood, a legal problem. I don't know that I need that attached to my Switch code that I was. This is not Nintendo did not say this. I'm not going to call out the company that did it. I think it might have been it might have been sort of like a language barrier thing in which but they did.
Sure.
They wrote defamation.
That means a very specific thing.
It does. It made me laugh though. Please no. I was like, no defamation. Honest reviews welcome. I was like, what is that? A threat? What are you saying? And then on Friday. Cado and I, I'm gonna get Rob into this. I don't know how many people have rope into what. Oh no, yeah, Rob's gone. Rob found out that Patrick's gonna stream Kingsfield 4. What's the subtitle for that? The Ancient City. In the ramp up to Elden Ring, we're gonna spend the next month or so playing some old ass From Software, From Software before people.
I gotta see if I can find a copy because I want to plug in my fucking PS2. I have one still. This is my time.
Yeah, your time has arrived. Kingsfield 4, the Ancient City, or is it actually Ancient City? Kingsfield 4. The ancient city.
Why else did I keep that thing if not for this moment?
Exactly. So yeah, we're gonna check that out. This isn't gonna be like a proper 101. We actually have a plan in place for the future of Waypoint 101s, which are not going away, but we have like a really fun. People have I've teased us doing a PowerPoint presentation as they stream. That idea is still around. It's been pushed off a couple of weeks for some very good reasons that'll make sense later. But we have a plan for like the next 6 months or so of Waypoint 101s that'll be a lot of fun for you and for us. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, you can watch me die a lot in a first-person Kingsfield game. So look for that on Friday. That's gonna do it for us. Fuck capitalism. Go home.
There was actually 1 second. Can we do a quick clap? I think my thing is acting up.
Sure.
28.
Sure.
Oh, mine fucking skipped. Hold on.
Okay.
Oh no. What is it doing? Okay. All right. 40.
Are you good?
Did you clap?
I did.
I don't think my track got it. Oh, now my computer is being extra weird. Okay, well, I got my clap at least on my end. I wanted to see if there was a way to...
Do you want to do it one more
tell.
time? I could try and clap louder.
Wait, clap once? Is it just gonna say something?
Ah!
Okay, wait. Say at...
Okay.
Hold on.
Okay, that's fine. I can do this.
Say at... Well, okay, now it's skipping. I'm so glad I don't have to work off this laptop normally. Okay. Say at 45.
Okay. Ah!
Great. Let's see what that looks like on these tracks. Okay. The delay isn't too weird. This thing is struggling.
The
so
computer.
like the waveforms are appearing a few seconds behind, and I was worried that we were desynced also, even though I'm recording both tracks at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks like it's only off by like a half second.
Okay.
This will be fun to figure out later. Okay. Track and backup are running. Uh-oh. Hello? Okay, no, you're still there. Great. I just can't tell because I can't see y'all.
Right.
Whether or not something has gone horribly wrong or if it's just like a pregnant silence. Okay. This is running. Y'all can clap. I'm going to go make myself some food. I'll be right back.
All right, sounds good.
For,
clap on
hold
top
on.
of the minute.
Hold on. My mic is awfully loud. Yeah. For an embarrassingly long amount of time, I could not remember what the website we use is to clap on. And so I'm just sitting into my Google search bar typing like clock,
Website.
count, like waiting for it to come to me. And I was like, 'cause I refused to ask for help. I was like, I'm not gonna. No. I'm gonna sit here and be embarrassed until I remember what time that is. But I got it. So all right, whenever.
All right, let's go on 35. All right.